Good morning. Welcome to the last Louisiana's Watchman Radio Program. I'm going to go into a little hiatus. Uh, so, but today I'm going to take advantage of this last hour and going to do a couple readings for you. 4th of July is next week, and I want to read the Declaration of Independence to you, but I also want to read a speech, a famous speech, which most people only know the last sentence of the speech. It's Patrick Henry's "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. His speech was given March 23rd, 1775, and it was a little bit over a year, before the Declaration of Independence was given. It's pretty telling what he said. If you put it into perspective of what's going on today, it what's happening today is kind of rang true what happened back in 1775. Instead of dissent being expressed towards King George in Great Britain, today that dissent is, well, it should be expressed towards our federal government, because a lot of the things that the federal government is doing and has done kind of reflects what was going on, 230 some odd years ago. But before I do that, I still have 3 copies of a book that I talked about a few weeks back. No More National Debt by Bill Still, and the first 3 people to text me with their name and address, I'll mail you a copy of that book. It's pretty telling of one of the big problems that faces our country today, which is our currency. I've read that, and it's in the book. Bill Still states it in his book that the biggest key to a state's or country's sovereignty is control of its currency. And today we do not, or I should say today, so 100 years ago from today, back in 1913, Congress gave away that control of our money supply to the Federal Reserve, which is a collage of private international banks. They have no loyalty to this country. They have no loyalty to any flag. It's amazing that a lot of people don't realize this. Anyway, the book No More National Debt, Bill Still goes into the history of money, what money is. He shows throughout history civilizations, what they have used for money, and he shows a biblical view of what money should be and what it shouldn't be. He goes into the history of America and the central banks that the private central banks that were given charters over the country. It was three times in the past. I think the third time being the Federal Reserve. He talks about the assassination of presidents, how it could be connected to basically a currency war between the private banks and the government of the United States. He goes into the birth of the Federal Reserve, which was first discussed. It was either 1910 or 1912 on an island off the coast of Georgia, and named island's Jekyll Island. And he goes into how the biggest bankers and politicians met on that island for 10 days and pretty much ironed out the Federal Reserve Act, which gave us the Federal Reserve System and our form of currency today. He argues why gold isn't why gold shouldn't be the reserve for our currency, basically because Congress cannot control the value or the quantity of gold in the market. It's gold is a commodity. It is traded worldwide, and the price of gold fluctuates, and there are too many variables that can affect the price of gold. So Bill Still, he makes the point of a fiat system, which is basically what we have today with our dollars, Federal Reserve notes. It's fiat money. It's not backed by anything but the good faith of United States government and we, the taxpayers. But the government doesn't control the quantity of that money, and the money that's loaned into existence by the Federal Reserve has interest attached to it. The government actually makes a loan from the Federal Reserve System with interest attached to it. Bill Still's argument or point is that Congress has the authority in the Constitution, has the authority to basically create money, to create the money supply. And he actually he gives the argument of those who oppose that, saying how Congress is corrupt enough as it is. How can we trust Congress in controlling the quantity and value of our money? And Bill still goes into lays out the evidence of how that can be done. Basically, it's us, the people, holding Congress accountable for the inflation or deflation of a treasury note, a actual United States Treasury note versus a Federal Reserve note, which we the people have no control over. He shows at today, current time, North Dakota has what is called a state chartered bank. It was chartered by the state of North Dakota. It is a public entity, and I don't have the article in front of me, but basically, the state of North Dakota does not face the budget problems or money shortfalls that the rest of the states face today, and it's due in large part to North Dakota having their own state chartered bank. Now, they don't have their own currency, but they're able to use Federal Reserve currency and do banking that nowhere reflects the common theory of banking today, which is primarily, revolves around fractional reserve lending, which is then I've explained this in past shows. Basically, is if you have $100 in real cash, what fractional reserve lending does, it lets you multiply that $100 by 10, which is the pretty much the normal rule, but multiply that $100 by 10 and actually loan out an additional $900 with interest attached to it. That basically was created. The money, this $900, was created out of nothing. So what the Bank of North Dakota has done with their bank, the way they do business, is that they leverage 1-to-1, which is whatever money they got sitting in their bank, that's the amount of money they can loan out. They loan money to themselves. The Bank of North Dakota loans money to the state of North Dakota to fund projects, any kind of maybe budget shortfalls, anything, and they charge either zero or very very low interest. Now, what does that do? Well, if there's interest charged, if there's interest charged on a loan, if a state government loan makes a loan from a commercial bank, there's going to be interest attached to it, and that's basically money that the state loses in repaying the loan. Where the state controls the bank, any interest that is charged is actually money that goes back into the state bank, which actually goes back to the people. So the people actually profit off of the Bank of North Dakota rather than private stockholders of a commercial bank. There's a story that came out this week on NOLA.com talking about the rise in interest rates. This was written by Manuel Torres. This is on the 27th of June. The title of the article is "Rising Interest Rates Hitting Local Governments Across U.S. and Other Jefferson Parish Politics Links." And the article goes through and talks about the shortfalls of certain projects that Jefferson Parish has kind of sitting in the wings right now, and how it's going to cost so much more money because the interest rates are rising. Well, I sent Mr. Torres an email and told him about the Bank of North Dakota and how their state chartered bank system works for them. And the perfect example here of rising interest rates, if Jefferson Parish did business with a state chartered bank, say the Louisiana, the Bank of Louisiana, it would be a state chartered bank. Jefferson Parish could fund their budget if they need to borrow money, and they wouldn't have to worry about rising interest rates. They could either borrow the money at 0% or close to nothing, because the interest wouldn't be going to stockholders. There's it's the issue of having to make a profit off the loan is taken out of the picture, and Jefferson Parish wouldn't suffer this rise in interest rates, this cost of interest. Also, student loans. If you've kept up with the national political scene, Mary Landrieu had posted something on her Facebook page about the doubling of interest rates on student loans. Well, here again, a state chartered bank would solve that problem and basically take the federal government out of the picture, and the Federal Reserve for that matter. A state chartered bank could loan money to students at a low interest rate, and not have, and the student wouldn't have to worry about a doubling in interest rate, to pay back the student loans. There's so many benefits to having a state chartered bank. I don't know why other states haven't followed North Dakota. North Dakota chartered their bank right at the turn of the 20th century, 1900 something another, and it was because farmers were being just ransacked by money baggers, the money changers. They were charging exuberant amount of interest on loans to farmers for equipment, farming their land and such. So the bank, North Dakota, responded with forming their own bank. And so for over 100 years, the Bank of North Dakota has been in existence and has been serving the needs of the people of North Dakota. They do work with private banks. It's like competition. It's competition, but it's not like they're trying to drive private banks out of business. I can't get into the details of the story because I don't have the story in front of me. But Louisiana's facing issues of money shortfalls, and they're having to cut programs here and there, education and law enforcement, Medicaid. The state looks to the federal government for grant money, or be it loans, and the only problem with that is that we become servant to the lender. We become servant to the federal government. I mean, it's the federal government can say, well, we'll give you this money, but you have to do this, or you'll have to pass this piece of legislation in order to get the money. We could, Louisiana could really take a step forward in self-sufficiency if we had our own state chartered bank. And this is something that Bill Still goes into in his book. You ought to give the book a read. This is the only way we're going to change things in our state and in our country, is to start reading and educating ourselves rather than sitting on the couch or in the easy chair watching news networks. It's not working. It's dumbing down America. People who just want to watch the news and think that whatever the news is dishing out to them is truth. They're in the business for ratings, just like any other business. There was a time when the news was, had a moral standard, I guess you could say, of reporting the news, being what they call that fourth branch of government. But it's long gone, if you ask me. Okay, there was an article about Supreme Court striking down heterosexual only marriage. I don't know. I'm kind of past all that. I mean, it's I believe marriage is it's given to us by God, and it's between man and a woman. I believe the federal government has no say-so in the matter, and that the Supreme Court has no say-so in deciding on what marriage is. It's basically it's we're turning the federal government into God to decide things like this, and I think it's ridiculous. It was the Supreme Court laid down another decision, basically saying that we have no right to remain silent basically is what the Fifth Amendment says. There was a case in Texas, Salinas versus Texas, that this decision came from. Again, I'm not putting much stock in the Supreme Court or the federal government anymore. I think they're out of control. They completely ignore the Constitution. I don't think they even understand the Constitution. I read an article. It was a representative or a senator. They asked a question regarding the Constitution, and well, it might have had something to do with the free speech or something like that. And the congressman replied that that statute is found in Article 1 of the Constitution, which freedom of speech amendment's the Bill of Rights. It's the First Amendment, not Article 1 of the Constitution. So I mean, we got people up in government. They don't even, they may have not, probably haven't read the Constitution in years, and what they follow is their party platform. Basically, that's their Constitution. Whatever their party stands for, that's what their Constitution is. So the Supreme Court decisions, get worked up about it. I mean, it's something. These are issues that should be solved by the states, by the parish and counties. But anyway, there was an article that I had printed up a few weeks ago about Common Core. Had the education, they had the education debate in the state legislature, and they were trying to introduce Common Core into the public school systems. Well, anyway, this woman here, Deborah Goodwin, posted an article. It's titled "Common Core: An Attack on Freedom and What to Do About It." And this is the article. So what is happening in our education system? We reviewed a discussion of this topic with a representative of the American Principles Project, and here are just some of the anti-constitutional and Orwellian goings-on. What is this Common Core about? It is about the idea of collective thought. Your children will be educated not to their full free potential, but to some servants of the state. They will be tested over and over again. The results of those tests will be filed away and determined what their life will be. How did this happen? Common Core, aka Race to the Top, presented the curriculum standards to the states while the legislatures were in recess, and the Fed required an answer in 2 months. This did not allow the legislators to review, comment, or even be consulted before the states had to answer. And of course, the Fed dangled a lot of money promises too. States are constitutionally granted right to educate their citizens are denied. 10th Amendment is ignored. The state must adopt all of the curriculum. Once adopted, no more than 15% in each area may be modified. Teachers, principals, nor parents will have any say in the curriculum. None. Dismantlement of the First Amendment rights. The right to privacy is in serious jeopardy with Common Core. The state intends to keep records on the children from K through career. The federal government is claiming access to this information will tell them if the education system is working. What it does do is deprive citizens of this country of any privacy at all. Disciplinary records, health history, family income, religious affiliation, parent political affiliation. These will all be available to the state. Your children become not human, just cogs serving the state. Over 400 data points are expected to be kept on each child and specifically tied to the child by name and probably social security number. We understand the Educational Rights and Privacy Act has been gutted to allow sharing all personal information across the Department of Education, Department of Labor, of Health and Human Services, and with private agencies. A reminder, the Department of Education is prohibited by statute to keep an education database, so they are pushing the states by threat and money promises to give the information wanted. So the stakes will be very high indeed. Imagine applying for a job and the employer has more information about you than you do. Do you remember your third or sixth grade actions and thought? The database will, and it will be available to those who ask and any hackers too. Don't think you can opt out of this. It is sweeping. They are intending to make all education enslaved to Common Core. This means homeschoolers, charter schools, private schools, and we can expect the Fed to squash any attempts at education outside the approved Common Core. Common Core violates 3 federal statutes. Number 1, General Education Provisions Act. Number 2, Department of Education Organization Act. And number 3, Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. Previous legislatures were so concerned about this, they passed these laws to keep exactly this sort of dangerous anti-freedom teachings and slave state propaganda out of our classrooms. They tried once before, in 1995, with a curriculum so vile and full of political correctness, the Congress defeated it 99-1. Unfortunately, we can't expect D.C. to do the same again. We must stop this at our state lines. The cost. Well, they don't know. There will be teacher training, textbooks, instructional materials, the development of the new technology for the computerized testing. Although all the tests are computerized, many must be hand-scored. One would suppose those people will want to be paid. The Fed's estimates are, as usually, really low, around $5 per student. They say a more reasonable estimate would probably be about $100 per student. Just look at the healthcare estimates compared to what the CBO is now saying. Who is writing this curriculum? You should know who is behind the development of Common Core. The national computerized tests are being created by Partnership for Assessment for College and Careers and Smarter Balance. The U.S. Department of Education gave $360 million of your money to these 2 organizations. Of course, once the money runs out, guess who is left holding the bag? Yes, the states. We must here mention Smarter Balance is advised by none other than the well-known socialist and founder of the Weather Underground, who were responsible for several bombings in America from 1969 to 75, Bill Ayers. Conclusion. Nullify it in your state. Our founders and framers gave us a constitution that promotes freedom, limited government, personal responsibility, free enterprise, and local government. This new vision creates a command economy and unlimited government. The children will be taught government as the right to direct them. Future generations will be the servant of the state and society. There are many Stop Common Core organizations. Find or found one in your state. They are on Facebook and have websites. Help educate your state legislators and encourage them to withdraw from Common Core now. It's your money being used against you. Act locally. Find and support the homeschool co-op in your neighborhood or faith community. If you have a teaching talent, offer it. Remove your children from the grasp of public school system. Take up the mantle of the 10th Amendment and reclaim your right to have local control of the education of your children. Nullify Common Core. Become extraordinary again. Again, this was written by Deborah Goodwin, and I believe I may have gotten this off of the 10th Amendment Center website. It's if you do a Google search of 10th Amendment Center, it should pop up number 1. Okay. Let me get to this to the speeches now. The Declaration of Independence and Patrick Henry's speech. Before the Declaration of Independence, there was debate on whether the 13 colonies would declare independence. There were petitions made to the British Crown and to the Parliament by the colonies expressing their dissent over basically tyrannical government upon them. Assessing heavy taxes upon the colonies, and basically just being treated unfairly and without representation in Parliament. Well, in 1775, March 23rd, Patrick Henry addresses the Virginia House of Burgesses in Richmond, Virginia. This is his "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. And it goes, "No man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism, as well as abilities, of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House. But different men often see the same subject in different lights, and therefore I hope it will not be thought disrespectful to those gentlemen if, entertaining as I do opinions of a character very opposite to theirs, I shall speak forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. This is no time for ceremony. The question before the House is one of awful moment to this country. For my own part, I consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery, and in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of the debate. It is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at truth and fulfill the great responsibility which we hold to God and our country. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time, through fear of giving offense, I should consider myself as guilty of treason towards my country, and of an act of disloyalty toward the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. Mr. President, it is natural to man to indulge in the illusions of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth and listen to the song of that siren till she transforms us into beasts. Is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be of the number of those who, having eyes, see not, and having ears, hear not the things which so nearly concern their temporal salvation? For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and to provide for it. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging the future but by the past. In judging the past, I wish to know what there has been in the conduct of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify these hopes with which gentlemen have been pleased to solace themselves in the House. Is it that insidious smile with which our petition has been lately received? Trust it not, sir. It will prove a snare to your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be portrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with those warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our land. Are fleets and armies necessary to a work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. I ask, gentlemen, sir, what means this martial array, if its purpose be not to force us to submission? Can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for all this accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir, she has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. They are sent over to bind and rivet upon us chains which the British ministry have been so long forging. And what have we to oppose to them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. Have we anything new to offer upon the subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up in every light of which it is capable, but it has all been in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? What terms shall we find which have not been already exhausted? Let us not, I beseech you, sir, deceive ourselves. Sir, we have done everything that could be done to avert the storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne, and have implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the ministry and Parliament. Our petitions have been slighted, our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult, Our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. In vain, after these things, may we indulge the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. There is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve the inviolate those inestimable privileges for which we have been so long contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, we must fight. I repeat it, sir, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to God of hosts is all that is left to us. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be next week or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and when a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength by irresolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemy shall have bound us hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak if we make proper use of the means which the God of nature hath placed in our power. The millions of people armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country as that which we possess, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations, and who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not to be strong alone. It is to be vigilant, the active, the brave. Besides, sir, we have no election. If we were base enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged. The clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. I repeat it, sir, let it come. It is vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Now that's the speech that Patrick Henry made, the famous "Give me liberty or give me death" speech, March 23rd, 1775, in the Virginia House of Burgesses in Richmond, Virginia. The reason why I read this, because there are things that he spoke of in general that reflect what's going on today. We got drones in the air that watch what we do. The story, the NSA stories, our government is spying on us, American citizens, because of what? Because we have a difference of opinion and what those in the federal government think. Because we believe that the federal government should remain in the parameters of the Constitution, which was created by the states. And his speech lays the groundwork of what ended up being a year and 3 months later, the Declaration of Independence. And I wanted to read this. Excuse me. I wanted to read this because the 4th of July is, to me, it's for a lot of people, it's just turned into a day of barbecue and being with friends and family, shooting fireworks, and nobody really understands what Independence Day was about, what it is, and because we've lost sight of that, we're now living with the consequences of what's going on today, whereby As a state, we cannot govern ourselves without the approval of Washington D.C. There's a lot in Declaration of Independence, and I want you to listen closely to the facts that are submitted. This declaration, that they wrote this Declaration of Independence and sent it to the king, and in it gives reasons to the king why the 13 colonies would declare an independence. So when I start reading through these reasons, listen carefully to what these men that signed their names to this document. Listen carefully to what's stated here, and compare it to what's going on today. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one person to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government, and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended he is utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such disillusions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices, and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefit of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with the power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in this most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do, and for the support of this declaration. With a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. The signers of the Declaration: John Hancock. From New Hampshire, Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton. From Massachusetts, John Hancock, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert Treat Payne, Elbridge Gerry. From Rhode Island, Stephen Hopkins, William Ellery. From Connecticut, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, Oliver Walcott. From New York, William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, Lewis Morris. From New Jersey, Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, Abraham Clark. From Pennsylvania, Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, George Ross. From Delaware, Caesar, Rodney, George Reed, Thomas McKean. From Maryland, Samuel Chase, William Paca, Thomas Stone, Charles Carroll of Carrollton. From Virginia, George Wythe, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, Carter Braxton. From North Carolina, William Hooper, Joseph Hughes, John Penn. From South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., Arthur Middleton. From Georgia, Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, and George Walton. That was the reading of the Declaration of Independence from July 4th, 1776. Well, that's it. I enjoyed doing this. I hope that everything that I've talked about on this show has helped anyone out there to understand what's going on in our state and in our country. That was my intention when I started this. I was not trying to make a profit off of it. It would have been nice if I could have. Maybe would have kept me on the air a little bit longer. But anyway, things are what they are. I'd like to thank Christy with Plexus Slim for sponsoring my show. She's been a great help. I'd like to thank Richard Dees and WABL for allowing me to spend this hour every Saturday to come to you and share my thoughts and feelings on what's going on in the state and country and trying to put a biblical aspect to it. I may come back on time and time again when I feel necessary, if I have some information I feel like I should share. But until then, I am Brian Bridges. This is Louisiana's Watchman Radio Program. Y'all have a great weekend, great week. Enjoy the 4th and try to remember what the 4th of July is all about. Y'all have a great day. Bye.